bring home. Okay, so these are the things that we're going to be taking a look at later in the presentation today. So to kind of get into the specifics, what we will be having is three specific takeaways. One is the learning experience of being both an entrepreneur and a parent. What are the 5 learnings? And some resource tools that you can take home and read at your leisure. So this is the cartoon character Stitch from Disney. And I love this. Ohana means family. So Ohana is a language, and in that language it means family. And family means that no one gets left behind or forgotten. And come to think of it, I mean, this is exactly the same at both work and at home. That you, as the head of the family, as someone who has got an important role to play in the family, your first responsibility is to make sure that everyone is carried along with you. Nobody is left behind. Nobody is forgotten. So why are we learning so intense? As a parent, I mean, we all played different roles in life. When we were kids, our parents taught us values at home, or our grandparents taught us values at home. We went to school, we went to college, and we learned some more over there. We probably did a CA, MBA, some kind of a professional course, and we learned something over there. We probably did jobs, and we learned something over there. But those of us who are parents will probably agree that the learning curve is possibly the steepest at home. Um, it's pretty much similar actually when you're running your own enterprise. And if you really kind of think about why is it that learnings are so accelerated, is because at both the enterprise as a business owner and at home as a head of the family, it can be quite unforgiving. The learnings can be quite unforgiving. You make mistakes and you're possibly going to be shown up immediately. Typical situations at home are when guests come over and you're doing something and it's probably something that is not right or haven't done it perfectly, and suddenly you'll have one of your younger kids who pipes up and says, "Dad, that's not the right thing to do," and this is right in front of the guests or your extended family or whatever, and it can be quite embarrassing. So even if they don't actually speak up, kids know, right? And the fact that they know that you were probably not perfect is something that you're not necessarily happy about. So the learnings can be quite unforgiving, which means that you're on an accelerated learning path. Of course, the great thing at both the enterprise and at home is that both are loving enough to give you a second chance. But the wonderful thing is that you yourself don't feel very good about having got it wrong the first time, right? So, which is why probably learnings are steep, but it's an enjoyable experience. Um, Question is that how do we leverage the learnings from one in the other space and vice versa, right? So these thoughts are just to kind of set the context. So this is the first learning which I wanted to share with you. One is that both building a family and an organization, they require your personal involvement and time. There is really no alternative to engagement, and this engagement is a very personal engagement. It's not something that you can delegate to somebody else. You can't delegate leadership either at home or in the office. So if you need to be there for that parent teacher meeting, or you need to be there at that annual day, or you need to be there at possibly the funeral of your colleague's parent, you need to be there personally. Sending someone else does not really mean anything either to your team member or to your kids. We think that things can get sorted out on their own. We want to believe that without us, things will be the same at home, things will run efficiently at home. We believe that we can stay away from office and things will just be the same, performance will take care of itself. um, Maybe that's true, but that's true probably only for a very, very small fraction of the population. For most of us, the moment we step away, the moment we take our eyes off the ball, we find that things slip, either at the family or in the office. So really, unless you're kind of a pretty evolved guy who can take care of both in a seamless way, you will find that to keep a family happy and bonded, and also to keep your team members in the organization happy and bonded, is going to require a lot of your personal involvement and time. You just can't outsource this. I think a simple example is what our moms or our wives do with their kids, right? When the kids are not well, What cures them is really not the doctor's medicine, right? It's not the cough syrup or the Vicks or whatever that we apply on them. It is the love with which the hand applies the Vicks that possibly gets rid of the cold. You can't replace that hand, right? So when the kid goes to sleep, possibly holding your fingers or holding your hand under the blanket safely tucked away, and it's dark and he closes his eye, he is going to sleep with the secure assurance that there is his mother or his grandmom who is there to take care of him. The security with which he goes to sleep is possibly the medicine that gets him well. In exactly the same way, and family as well, our team members have got insecurities, they got worries, they got their frustrations, their anxieties, their angers, their stresses at work. But when they go home and they go home and sleep, the reason why most of them sleep well is because they think that their boss is there behind them, standing by to take care of issues in case they're not able to manage something. To get to that point where a child trusts you or a team member trusts you takes a lot of back-breaking effort. You don't get it through position. You can't dictate it. You can't command respect. You got to earn your respect. You got to earn your trust. All of this is possible only if you're going to be directly involved and personally leading it. It's not going to be possible by leaving it to someone else. So nothing gets built on its own. You got to stay involved. There's no shortcut to this one. The second learning is that your team members and by corollary your kids are the source of your greatest joys and also your greatest frustrations. But that's the way it's going to be. So you might as well enjoy it. Our greatest source of hope is our kids, right? When we see them in action, they do well at their exams and or they play even a bit role in the school play, or they made that outstanding elocution speech on Independence Day, or their science experiment that wins them a gold medal, or it could be a shloka chanting competition where they got a certificate. It may be a consolation certificate, but that gives you a huge high. It tells you that the certificate is not for the kid, the certificate is for you. You feel as if you have won it. And that's exactly the same with their team members as well. Someone who reports to you, who is chosen as the employee of the year, someone who possibly even quits your organization but gets appointed at a senior level in some other company, and suddenly it's your heart that's kind of beaming with pride. You're saying, wow, this is the guy who worked with me. I groomed him, right? But equally, those same kids, those same team members are also the cause of our worst frustrations. And why those frustrations is because we feel that they are under delivering on their promise. They are underperforming in relation to their potential. And this is the conversations, classic conversations that all of us are used to at home, where our parents told us that, look, you're getting 92 marks out of 100 and max is not good enough. You've got to explain to me why you didn't get the balance 8 marks. That's the frustration that you are good enough. You can get 200 out of 100. Why didn't you do that? So the same people, the same kids, the same team members who give us the joys, the highs, also end up giving the frustrations. And sometimes you are at a complete loss as to what do you do with them, right? You can't beat them up. Uh, you can't let them get too demotivated. You don't want them to take any silly steps in life. So you have this sense of frustration building up in you where you want to tell them every time you believe that they have underdelivered, but you kind of just hold yourself back and you wonder when is the time when this guy is going to get the message? When is he really going to pull up his socks? When is he going to start utilizing the opportunities that he's so fortunate to have that probably you and I didn't have? Those frustrations are always going to be there. I think possibly, and maybe this is a dose of healthy realism now, that it's probably not a good idea to let these frustrations to get to you. To expect that your team members or your kids will do full justice to their potential 100% of the times is probably not even a logical expectation to have out of them. We probably have to go back and think of what we did with the opportunities we got. And hand on heart, you will probably think that, look, 10 out of 10 times I over delivered or lived up to my potential. But there will be those 2 or 3 times that you probably miss the opportunity. And that's really the law of nature. You just can't win it all. So probably the best thing to do is to be not so hard on yourself, but to let your kids be, let your team members be, enjoy the joys, probably enjoy the frustrations as well, and hope that they will just do a better job of it the next time round. So let's just stay in the moment, enjoy the journey, and let's not get too hassled about the end results that we're going to get from them. Our third learning is about control. So I kind of figured that the larger your organization, the more scaled up you are, the faster it grows, and therefore, and also by corollary, the older your kids are, the lesser is your degree of influence or control, right? So when our kids were tiny, of course, when they were newly born, they were infants, they were so completely dependent on you, right? They couldn't do anything. They couldn't even poo without your help. They needed your help for getting fed, for getting bathed, for drinking water, milk, whatever. And as they grow up and as they become teens, and possibly these days, by the time they are 10 or 11, suddenly, as a dad or a mom, you're kind of turned from being the most wonderful man or woman in the world to probably my worst enemy in the world. The same thing happens in an organization as well. When you set up a company, you know the guts of the organization, you know inside out. You have built the organization lovingly, brick by brick, and suddenly you scale up. You got this bunch of professionals coming in. Each one of them has got a view with regard to how the organization should be run. And suddenly you find that the child, which you so carefully brought up and which you always thought was your baby, is suddenly not your baby anymore. The baby seems to have a mind of its own. The baby seems to have multiple parents. And you figure out that you forget about controlling it. Even the degree of influence that you have on the organization is not really that much. And it kind of brings, I think, a sense of disappointment that, look, why did I put in all this effort? I gave the 10, 12 years of my life for my kids. I've kept up sleepless nights for them. I sacrificed so much for them. And suddenly you're faced with a situation where they don't seem to need you anymore. They seem to want their friends more. They seem to have gone overseas for studies. They don't bother to stay in touch with you. You want them to call you up at least once a week. They miss those appointments for the Skype calls or FaceTime calls. And you begin to wonder, why did I do all this sacrifice in life? It looks like my kids don't need me anymore. The same thing in an organization where decisions are now being taken by everybody else. And you're probably sitting in that room thinking, in the corner office, thinking that you can be doing much more. Why isn't it that anybody's actually coming to me for inputs? So, what's the right way to think about it? I think the first thing is that this sense of disappointment is quite natural because raising kids, like raising a company, is a very emotionally draining experience. The reason why both these experiences are so special is because it's your personal sweat and blood that's involved in it. You can't keep the emotion out of raising kids or raising a company. So, first, let's recognize why we think the way we think. The second thing we have to think about is, if you're not happy with this situation, then when are we going to be happy? Do we really want our kids to stay at home? Do we really want our kids to be dependent on us all the time? Do we want to really build an organization that comes to check back to you for every small decision? And once you ask yourself the question, it's strange because you will take a decision to say that, look, no, I don't want either my child or my organization to be dependent on me. It was my job to have given them wings, so they have to fly, right? So your objective mind tells you that is perfectly all right for these little birdies once upon a time. Now they become big birds. They got strong winds. They're going to leave the nest. They're going to fly away. You will not be able to keep them in your line of sight anymore. They're going to be away, and you've got to trust to nature and to God and to them to make sure that they're going to be safe. And wherever their nests are in the world, they will go there into their nest safe and sound at the end of the day. The same way, in case of an organization as well, you've done your job, you have nurtured it, it's gone to a size, you've got to be grateful. You've got to be grateful that it's got scaled up, it's institutionalized, and there are others who are not taken up your life's work. So let's not worry about the reduction of influence. However, that does not mean that you can't continue to be high impact. Even when your kids are not physically dependent on you, you can still impact their lives in a meaningful way. Without creating a dependence, you can still be that source of moral support that young people need so badly in today's world. Even today in an organization, there will be issues of policy. There will be issues of fundamental principles on which decisions are needed, and those decisions yet will come to you. So you can continue to be high impact. Only let's not have an expectation that the type of role that we played in the first 10 years for our kids or for the organization will be exactly the type of role that we'll play in the next 10 years. The kids have evolved, the organization has evolved, you have got to evolve as a parent and an entrepreneur as well. The fourth learning, with your team and your family, let's remember that we are not the owner. We are only a trustee. So this was told to me by my ex-boss at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Thomas Matthew. Is now happily retired. And he told me the day I left the organization that don't own an organization, be a trustee on behalf of the people who have given you the privilege to lead the organization. I think it's exactly the same with the family as well. In the family, they are given you, they have been gracious enough to give you the opportunity, they have been gracious enough to put their trust in you to let you lead the family, to let you play that role as a leader in the family. That's all. You don't own them. It's not a position of authority. It's a position of service. It's a position of responsibility. I think the great thing about being a trustee is that it allows you to stay detached. It allows you to demonstrate what in Sanatan Dharma, in our Gita, they talk as a Sakshi Bhav, the ability of a lotus, which is a popular example, that grows in the water. If you take a look at the leaf, it's standing on water, but the water actually does not stick to the leaf at all. I think it's a classic example that's used in our philosophy, which I think is typically the role or the view or the perspective of a trustee. He is there in the organization, but he is not the organization. In your mind, the separation of ownership and of management goes a long way in helping you to do a really good job, both in your family as well as in the office. Usually, it is the trustees who end up doing a better job at leaving a legacy than an owner. So, open question to all of us is, can we be their chief trustee both at office as well as at home? The fifth and the last learning that I thought I should share with you is whether at home or at office, the respective command is directly proportional to your usefulness. And maybe it's a very realistic, a very pragmatic, a very practical way to actually close out the learnings from this webinar. We all, most of us, I think, have come from fairly basic, fairly humble backgrounds. We worked our way up. We earned money, we earned respect, we brought up our kids. It's good to see them happily settled now. And then you begin to wonder as to how am I going to be useful? And the reality is that 80%, 90% of us will not be useful in maybe another 10 years, 15 years time. Knowing that, is it possible for us to work towards being useful and relevant to others at all points in time? Is it possible for us to get into a mode of continuous learning that will help us to reskill? Is it possible for us to learn to get into roles that we haven't played in the past so that it expands our own comfort zones? Is it possible for us to take on roles that impact the lives of our kids and lives of our organizations in ways different from what we have done in the past? I think it's a question of reinventing yourself, and it's hard, right? Because you got to unlearn whatever you have learned and you got to relearn something new. But if we can be reborn, then chances are that we'll continue to be relevant, we'll continue to be useful to people in the future as well. It's quite likely that most of us are going to be living in an era where the average age lifespan of a human being will probably be 85 to 90 years quite easily. Just given the consciousness that we all have towards our health, given the proliferation of really good quality healthcare facilities. So 50, 55, 60 could actually be a very early time for us to be retiring. It's quite likely that even if you're retired at 55 or 60, that your post-retirement life is possibly going to be as long as your working life. And when you think of it that way, you're saying, wow. So maybe a good way to look at this is to say that if I realize this truth, is it possible for me now to take some steps that over the next 10 years before I retire, I figure out a way by which I can continue to be relevant and useful both to my organization and to my home. Usefulness, while it's useful to somebody else, also has got a great benefit that it helps you to feel contented, it helps you to stay occupied, it helps you to feel happy about the fact that you have been able to positively influence and contribute to somebody else's life, right? So I think one has got to be very selfish about this and figure out how we can continue to feel happy about ourselves by continuing to be useful to someone else. So those are the five similarities between running a home or running an office, where I thought it's possible for us to kind of cross leverage learning. Um, like in all our webinars, we want to kind of leave behind some resource tools or reading materials for you to go away and think about. So the first one I thought, which was quite kind of a very to-do type thing, is an article from Wall Street Journal on how to run your family like a business. And they're given two or three situations there, how folks who have taken simple things like a checklist of pending things for kids to do, um, and sticking it up on the kids' cupboard so that they can actually cross it off, just as a means to kind of make sure that kids are staying on track with regard to their own progress, their own plans, etc. So there are a couple of other examples there which I thought were quite interesting. So that's really what you can take away from the business and implement in family. And I put one of the other way around as well, where what are the leadership lessons from the playground that you can implement in business life, right? So you have the web links there, and as always, we'll be happy to mail you a copy of this presentation. So please do take the time out to read through both these posts. So that kind of brings us to the end of today's webinar. I hope it's been useful. As I said earlier, it's a slightly different topic that we wanted to pick up. Usually we talk on stuff that's either useful to business people from a CFOing standpoint, or we talk to people who are in the job markets, they're really finance professionals, on how to plan their careers, etc. Um, but I thought we should kind of maybe leave behind some thoughts on what we can do better as parents, because most of us are parents, and that's a big part of our lives, and a part of our life that's very close to our hearts, right? So as always, please keep the feedback coming. We'll be very happy to improve this series of webinars to bring in topics that are more relevant and useful to you. Happy to take any questions in case you have any. So please do use the chat box under the questions tab to post your questions. Abhishek and Srijit will be happy to kind of pick these up, and I'll be happy to spend another 10-15 minutes in answering them. Okay, I have a question here which says, okay, how do we deal with indiscipline? I think what the question wants to ask is, what do you do with team members and kids whom you love, who you know are high potential, but who refuse to stay disciplined? Um, okay, so I've got a slightly different take on this. I think uh, the entire concept of discipline, to my view, is somewhat outdated. Um, it's it's I think part of the old command structure that probably some of us, most of us, when we grew up, were used to, where what our parents said was pretty much the law, and to break it was not considered to be um, a very good thing. I think in today's world, you cannot hope to control. I think that's a dream. What you can do, a best case scenario, is to influence. And I've kind of come to the conclusion that the best way to influence anybody is to actually come down or come up to the level, whichever way you think about it. But you've got to be able to speak their language. In my organization, for instance, the average age of our team members is 29 years. And if I cannot think like a 29-year-old, how do I run my organization? I can't. Um, and it kind of tells me that how do I try and run my role as a dad at home. If I'm going to be dad, that's one way to play the role. But if I can actually think like a 10-year-old, which is what my daughter is, so if she's a 10-year-old, can I put myself in the shoes of a 10-year-old kid and have a conversation with her? And I think if I do that, it's possible that I'll have a better chance of being heard, being listened to, as opposed to issuing a series of orders that probably she will nod her head to, but she's not really going to follow. So I think a lot of our frustrations on our teams and our kids not listening to us probably stem from an incorrect expectation that they will listen to us. I don't think team members feel obligated to listen to you. Just like how our kids don't feel obligated to listen to you. You're just another individual who's probably, of course, there's respect because you're older to them or you hold a position, etc. But I think you have to let go. It's better not to micromanage. It's better to leave things as a suggestion. It's better to get them to think. It's better to create an ecosystem where they're learning and evolving every day rather than telling them what and how to do it. I think kids and team members these days want to figure these things out themselves. They don't like their bosses or their parents telling them what to do and how to do it. Okay. Uh, okay, I see a comment here. Nice way of linking philosophy to business. Thank you. Can you touch on dirty office politics that play destroys many things? Okay, so I think that see, it's a reality. Okay, the grapevine in your organization is probably going to be stronger any day as compared to the formal communication systems uh, that you have. So one of the things that we first have to recognize is that we'll have to live with it, right? No matter what you do, there are going to be people who are not happy. There are going to be people who possibly have got a different spin on the facts as compared to what you have. I think the best thing to do in these cases is to be transparent, right? And by transparency, and this is a favorite of my co-founder Deepak's, that integrity and transparency is about unity of thought, speech, and action. If our teams and our kids are able to understand and see for themselves that what we think, what we say, and what we do are all in perfect alignment most of the time, then I think that the politics dies down on its own. For instance, one of the things that we have done in our organization, and when I'm making these sessions, please, I don't want to convey an impression that we are a perfect organization or I'm a perfect dad or anything of that kind, but just a thought, which I think is a good thing that we do, is that the company's balance scorecard, for instance, is public information within the company. Now that helps because I think it allows everyone to see that okay, this is what the CEOs or the MDs balance scorecard is like. He has got a target like all of us. So when I take on my target, I know exactly why I take it on because I can see which part of the CEO's balance scorecard I'm taking it on. Similarly, when you do a quarterly update, you actually benchmark your own performance against the plan, and you go back and tell the team where you succeeded, where you failed. When you have a performance appraisal process, you apply it to you yourself and make sure that the board does a performance appraisal of you. Now, when these things become public, I think it's a serious breakthrough, right? Because then everybody is saying, look, this is not a guy who's kind of talking down to me, but he's himself above the rules. No, he is pretty much someone like me, and the same rules that apply to me apply to him as well. So, how do you translate this at home, for instance? So, we have a simple rule. I hate footwear that is left outside the shoe rack. So we take turns. It's easy as a parent to tell your kids that look, you should be doing this every day, okay, and be sure that it will not get done every day. But if you begin to take turns and say, look, Monday is dad's time to kind of keep the shoes back into the shoe rack, then the kids automatically see that they're doing exactly that you are doing exactly what they have been asked to do. So the rules of the game, if they are uniformly applied, then I think the chances of compliance are better. The chances that there will be twisted conversations in the form of office politics will automatically go away, right? So try it out. I think very hard to give a formula solution to a question like that, but just wanted to leave that thought behind to see how it goes. Okay. Uh, Okay, what is the role of our emotion in business? Okay, so I think it's not bad to be emotional in business, contrary to what a lot of people think, but it depends on what that emotion is. I think it's very important for example, to have a strong emotion of passion for quality or passion for client service, right? So in our business, a passion for being on time, passion to get it right every time, a passion to add value to the client, a passion for client delight, I think is an emotion which is a must have in our business. In any services business, this is a good emotion to have. A wrong place to have emotion is performance measurement. Right? So when you do performance evaluations, when you do target settings, you do budgets, that's a very wrong place to bring in emotions. So is it really possible for us to be unemotional at work? I think the answer is no, because we are human beings. The good God has given us emotions. It's part and parcel of our personality. Surely he wouldn't have given this to us if he hadn't meant us to use it in our day-to-day life. So I don't think there's anything wrong about emotion. The question is what is the emotion and what part of the business are you really applying that emotion to? Okay, one more question here. How to have a child get interest in studies? Okay, they are not ready to listen. Okay, great. So I'm thinking about this all the time, okay, because I think any kid is possibly happier watching TV or playing with friends or nowadays staring into their mobile phones or mobile devices rather than going and studying. So here's what I think. I think different kids learn differently, okay. The one thing which is an absolute fact is that kids are curious, okay, all kids are curious. We got to think as parents as to what is the right hook for the kid to convert that curiosity into knowledge acquisition, into skill acquisition, into learning acquisition, right? So that's the problem statement that we're all faced with as parents. I think we got to firstly understand how our kids learn, right? Some kids like to see the written word, which is the textbooks, and that was pretty much all that we had when we guys were kind of um, studying. There was only one way to study, which is you had a textbook. It was usually black and white, and you mugged it up and you wrote the answers, you got marks, you passed, and got into a good college or office or whatever. The wonderful thing is, as a parent, you got so many tools now to be able to teach your kids, right? So try look at something like Salman Khan Academy, right? So Sal Academy. Sal Academy has got a beautiful website. You get into that. They've got a graded system of teaching max. The wonderful thing about this is they give you points. They give your kids points. There is a way by which you and your kids, along with a coach or a teacher, can actually collaborate on their side. Now, when my daughters want to study maths, they always insist they want to do SAL Academy because they want to earn the medals that they get on SAL Academy, right? So if you get some number of points, you get a gold medal, and if you have 10 gold medals, you win a bigger prize. So what this is done is to basically gamify. That's the concept, right? So the gamification of studies is, I think, one of the big breakthroughs that has really happened. So try and gamify to get your kids interested. The second thing which I feel is a huge development over the past is the use of videos and audios to learn. Right? I do that all the time. Uh, Even when I'm traveling, it's so easy to kind of consume a YouTube video, say of a TED talk, right? So that's what you can do in your business. You're maybe on the treadmill and you're possibly listening to a TED talk. You're in your car at the back of your car and you're possibly listening to an audiobook, right? So how can you bring this into your family for your kids? Right? Simple. Just go online. There are so many websites that are actually showing they have got content for kids to learn any kind of a concept, right? So I have looked for stuff around English grammar. I've looked at stuff around French poetry. I've looked for stuff around gravity. I look for stuff around environmental conservation, and there are videos from all over the world on each of these subjects. And these videos, the beauty of them is that very rarely are they more than 20 minutes, right? And why is it more than 20 minutes? Because you also figured out that unlike previous generations, the attention span of this generation is extremely short, right? But what probably took us 1 hour to read and understand from a black and white textbook, probably today's kids don't need more than 20 minutes to understand that by looking at a video. So I think that's fine. As long as they get the concept, it's fine, right? So two thoughts for you. Um, One, try and gamify, and second, possibly use videos. Again, you got to sit down with them, put it up on your television screen, uh, run the internet at home, put on YouTube, show them these things. I think that engagement helps. I think kids love it when parents get involved with their studies. It's a lot of effort for you, but I think it possibly pays off, at least in terms of their interest to engage with you. Okay, let's look at one more question. They don't do things on their own. We have to constantly keep telling them. Okay, so the question of, I don't know if this refers to your team members or it refers to your kids, but they don't do things on their own. We have to constantly keep on telling them. So again, it depends a little bit, I guess, on how old your kids are. What I have done with my kids now is to treat them a little bit like adults to help them plan their month. And the monthly plan is a healthy mix, right? So there's a little bit of everything. There's a little bit of studies in there. There's a little bit of exercise. There's a little bit of social engagement with friends, and a little bit of family there, and a little bit of story time. And there are a couple of movies that are thrown in, and possibly a couple of times you're going out for dinner. So when they plan it out, I think it does two things, right? One, it gives them an idea as to what's in your mind, right? So every time we tell them, you're not doing what I ask you to do, but sometimes it's not very clear what exactly you want them to do. So you're going to take time out to sit down and just write it down to say that, okay, these are the things that we're going to achieve this month, right? Can we use the calendar on Microsoft Outlook or Google Calendar, whichever one you must be using? Take a printout, ask the kids to fill it up, and just stick it up on their cupboard, right? And that's the plan. And possibly just take a yellow marker and mark out the ones where you need to be personally involved. So some activities they go out and do on their own, some things you need to do along with them, and that's a plan. And just go out, and then every week you sit down and then score off the things that you've actually completed. The ones that are not done, have a conversation with them on why it didn't get done. Sometimes it can be as basic as that. It's worked for me. I think kids, we tend to underestimate them. I think kids of today are very smart. They completely get the concept of planning. We have to be careful about not stuffing in too much, which is your agenda, right? Because when it comes to kids, we're all greedy, right? We want to kind of get them to do a lot of what we want them to do. This is where the give and take comes, right? You got to compromise a little bit on the learning agenda. That's fine. We've got to give them what they are interested in so that they listen to you. it is better to do 20% less work, but retain the channel of communication with your kids. Trying to fast track things and break down the communication channel where they stop communicating their feelings to you is possibly the worst place you can be. So important to keep the engagement on. I think it's okay to kind of slow down the pace. As long as you're talking about how to improve the pace, I think you're still on good footing. And that's exactly the same as what happens in the office, right? So we all want our team members to do more. They may not be inclined to doing it, but whatever happens, that's a healthy debate to have as to what's a good target to take on. But don't break the trust in the relationship to the point where they don't come and talk their innermost feelings to you, because if that happens, then probably you lost the game. Okay. Um, okay, thanks for answering. You're most welcome. Okay, cool. So that's actually the end of the question list. So I'm assuming that there are no further questions. I'm happy to hang in here for another 30 seconds, 60 seconds in case there are any further questions coming up. Else we'll bring this session to a close. We'll wait for another 30 seconds. Cool. So it looks like there are no further questions. Thank you all so much for spending 45 minutes of your valuable time on a Friday afternoon. As always, it's been a pleasure to be here with you. Please keep your feedback coming in. We do these sessions at least once every month. We'd love to do webinars on topics that are useful to you. Please get in touch with Abhishek or Srijit or myself. My coordinates are given up there in the screen. Do check out our website, www.mycfo.in. You will get our coordinates out there. Thank you once again for joining us. Bye-bye.